Marti Konstant, I know you're there. I saw you.
Hello, how are you?
Oh, God. And there she is, the Post-it Queen. So, ladies and gentlemen, Marti is not just really well known for her work with agility mindset, but she is also informally, and this is a sign of affection, a number of us in the professional speaking industry here in Illinois refer to her as the Queen of Post-its. So, Marti, would you please, the audience is yours, the table is yours.
Sure. So thank you so much for that introduction. My background was originally as a marketer, a chief marketer for a number of years. And I navigated into becoming a workplace futurist, which is what I am today. But buried in all of that was a number of years in marketing project management. The people I hired on my team were project managers because the only way to get anything done within an organization is through project management. Ideas will only take you so far. So we're going to be talking about agility today. I research, write, and present on this topic, and my goal and my aim is to cure stagnation in the workplace, both at an individual level and at an organizational level. Many people ask me, Marti, why did you get started with agility? What was it about this? And we all have a backstory. My backstory started at the age of 13 years old. The reason I was so interested in mobility, flexibility, and agility is because I was immobilized at the age of 13. I was diagnosed with scoliosis, curvature of the spine, which meant that as I was going into my high school years, I could not move and do things like sports or even sit comfortably. I wore a brace from the top of my chin all the way down to my hips. I will show you what that looks like. This is the type of brace that I wore. And I wore it not just for 1 month, not just for 2 months, not just for 2 years, 1,277 days, 3.5 years. I learned so much about myself during that time. And while I was wearing that brace, and I was somewhat immobilized and unable to do a lot of the things that people my age were doing, I thought the one thing I have control over is what's in my mind. And so I rehearsed during that time of what I would do when that brace came off. So it was one of those setbacks that had a profound impact on that. I am going to start sharing my screen now. I have a presentation today. And before I do that, I would like to enlist Vicki, who is on the line, and also say hi to some people on the line like Bobby and Cynthia and Catherine and Kimi and all those others. We have a short poll. If we could get that up there, Vicki, that would be great. There's 2 polls. I don't know how doing 2 at once, but let's see how it works. What type of change impacts you today? Personal, technology, industry, or workplace? And then the second one is, where do you see yourself on the individual agility scale? And again, I don't know how it works with both. Oh, it's working perfect. Both at once. When working on these polls in the past, and it's pretty much, although we have a smaller sample today, we used to do this poll and the number one thing was technology. It caused so much anxiety. Yet today it's all about how does the pandemic impact us? So that's no surprise here. And then the other thing that's no surprise is no one claims 100% agile. They pretty much say, I'm pretty agile. And I will show you the results of some of my research. So we will end that poll. I'm ending it. I hope I can. Share results. There we go. I don't know if the second poll you can see, but I just rehearsed and shared some of that. Okay, so I am going to stop sharing these results. And if I could enlist Vicky's help if for some reason that doesn't go on. Okay, I'm going to now share my screen. Share my screen and start this quick presentation here. Slideshow, play from the start. Okay, we are talking about agility today. The name of this presentation is Career Agility, how you can future-proof your career. And career agility isn't just about the individual, it's about how you behave within the organization and how it impacts your role as a project manager. And guess what? It's not just for tech anymore, it's transforming how organizations hire, develop, and manage their people. Let's look at the history of Agile. In 2001, there was an Agile manifesto. For those of you who were working in project management then, of course, we were deploying complex software projects. And the Agile manifesto finally formalized what project managers have been doing for years, and they formalized it in such a way to be more flexible with market changes. And then fast forward to 2012, Agile Marketing Manifesto. And if you go online, you will see all of these manifestos published. Agile Marketing Manifesto, I was a part of in San Francisco in 2012, where about 25 global marketers got together and we said, hey, what's happening in software development makes sense. We need to get feedback early and often throughout our process so that it's a collaborative process, and we need to respond to market changes. We can't just go into our cocoon and develop our programs and expect people like the sales organization and the rest of the organization to hop on board. And now in 2017, Agile HR. So it is going across the organization. On the way back from my Agile marketing event in 2012, I had this inspiration at 30,000 feet. Why is it that we have all these great ideas when we're flying? I guess because we have uninterrupted time. I thought, why can't you apply this to the management of one's own career? At that time, this became my life's work. I started researching it, interviewed 120 people. I commissioned primary research on the topic. I wanted to understand why some people respond to change so easily and others struggle. And I wanted to understand if it could be cultivated. There was no definition for career agility at that time. I created one many years ago, about 8 years ago. It is an Agile career is a self-reflective, incremental career path guided by response to change, evolving job roles, and designed to optimize creativity, growth, and happiness. This is not just important for the individual, it's also important for those that work in organizations and the people who manage them. But what other types of agility are there? Several years ago, we didn't have a lot of talk about agility. I take this one from Pamela Meyer, author of The Agility Shift. What is business agility? Any team or organization that responds to unplanned or unexpected events and turns them into opportunities. Wonderful definition of business agility. And it pretty much describes the day in the life of a project manager. I also work on workforce agility. Workforce agility describes the aggregate career agility of the individuals within the organization, but it also describes things like the alternative workforce, which is what is happening now. Many project managers are working in the alternative workforce as freelancers, as contract workers. So it's about the organization's ability to manage the flexible dynamic workforce and all of how this affects HR. We're living in a VUCA world. We are surrounded by volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. It was a military term back in the 60s and 70s and described a little bit about what was happening when we were evolving from the time that the wall came down in Germany and the arms race and all that sort of thing. But it is now an excellent way to view the corporate world and what is going on now. The research I did on human behavior, and this is very much identified in the poll that we talked about earlier, is that we all fall somewhere between steadfast and agile, between stagnation and growth, between rigid and flexible. And if you self-identify in any organization, whether it's 10 people or 150 people, most people identify themselves just a little past the halfway point. So there is an aspirational part of agility in the mix. These are some of the benefits of being agile. So it's constrained versus open, survival versus thrival, rigid versus flexible, fearful versus confident, and the decision bias, safety versus opportunity, and things like the threat response. Deny or adapt. Do you want to deny what's happening in front of you, or do you want to adapt to it? A crisis response, pause or move, ignore or acknowledge. Couple agility concepts. What I noticed during the pandemic, we had a high course level of how we were going to adapt to what's happening around us and how we were going to leverage it. So learning by doing is something that is a very important part of what we all did. I call it the high density learning phase that we were involved in the first few months, and we are continuing to do so. We wouldn't be here today. Even Kimi would not be doing an event like this without the capability of having adapted to Zoom and all of the other tools that we're using now. People like Catherine Johns wouldn't be coaching people on virtual presence if there wasn't a significant need for it. The other topic is this idea of experiment, measure, learn. This was influenced by Eric Ries's thought process in the lean product development world, where he would talk about building products, measuring, and learning. Companies, like Netflix is always learning and always changing, and the interface is becoming more agreeable and easy for people to use. That happens because there's a lot of experimentation going on and a lot of learning and adjustments that are happening. So these are agility concepts. Let's talk about how agility affects the workplace itself. We have 4 focus levels, and we have things like, how does this impact the individual worker? How does it affect leadership, which is the theme of today's conference, leadership? And then how does it affect the organization? So if we take something like mindset, you're curious, you respond to change, you view your career as a series of projects versus the roles that you're in, which is a great way to think about it as project managers. The leadership is, hey, we have to downsize some of our workforce because we're in an industry that isn't growing as fast as others. So transportation, for instance, has had to let people go. Hospitality has had to downsize. But other organizations, like the stay-at-home stock companies, they are growing. So they're having to manage their inventory in a different way. Organizational benefits are, if you have people on your staff that respond to change well, you'll have an organization that can respond more quickly to these market realities. You'll have more relevant products, and you'll understand the customer requirements because you're doing a very good job at listening. The concept of career evolution. Our careers are iterative and they evolve. And it's not so much, oh my gosh, I got let go. It's not just stop here and start another one. It's evolving, and we're building on the portfolio. How can we lead by doing this? We need to support mentoring programs, coaching. Every person on the planet that works in an organization or other deserves to be coached in some way. Now, we have one-to-many coaching situations as well as one-to-one, but this is not something that should be reserved for just the absolute high potential employees. Organizational benefits. The workplace evolves to be more adaptive and sustaining. And then we have learning agility and workplace experimentation. I will not go much further on that, and you can have access to some of this information after the fact, but you can kind of see the picture that when an organization is agile and when they adopt things like learning agility, They're able to flex with the times. They can innovate rapidly. If you don't have learning agility in an organization, you will not have the capability of innovating on your products and services. And if you're not experimenting, we wouldn't be where we are today if we weren't willing to experiment. It's also a way to increase the retention as well as optimize your ROI within the organization. So it's a model that I developed specifically for the career. We have other models that have to do with the workforce, but we review things like responding to change. This is an 8 sitting on its side, and it's a career that develops, and it is in an infinite loop because you go around, and similar to the change curve of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross that she designed in the 1960s, there's no right way to move through this process in a career. But let's look at some of these concepts. A/B testing your career, creating an idea zone, activating the feedback squad. And one of the most important things is responding to change. Here's the change curve. And this is what we did at the pandemic. The pandemic is what we call, and what some call, Marcus Kirsch, from the Wicked company, he calls us a wicked problem. It's a problem that changes so fast that by the time we start to solve it, it's already morphed into something else. This is a very wicked problem. Hopefully some of the technology problems and projects that you're working on do not fall into this category. But this fell into this category. We denied it. Is this really happening? Do we really adapt to wearing masks at the very beginning of the pandemic? Then there's a bit of frustration and digging our feet in, depression, sadness. The extroverts I know are struggling with the environment that we're in right now because we don't have those large events that we're actually able to see one another. And then the experimentation happens, and then integration. This is the perfect area for a technology integration project. Let's look at the traditional state of work. And I'm proposing that we all view our careers as a series of projects. The traditional state of work, we start and we grow and we master. And our bosses absolutely love us. But at some point, we might get bored. We might want to get the project off to someone else for the final implementation because we've designed it, we've set it up, we've launched it, but every program then needs to be maintained. The problem there is there's a decline in interest and I'm out of here. Why not look at our career like this? And why not organizations look at this as they develop their people? The minute we get disinterested or we've completed and we've optimized that project, why not hop onto another project? This is very easy for project managers to understand because we talk about projects. But what this also is relevant for is for any job role within an organization or from job to job. So if you're viewing your career as a series of projects, you're on to the next one, you're sustaining an engagement level that's much higher than if you allow yourself to get to the point where your career or your project or your situation is no longer satisfying. If you're not able to optimize creativity, growth, and happiness. So how do you foster workplace agility? And how do you foster an agile mindset within an organization? Here's 6 ways. So cultivating an agile mindset, which we talked about earlier in this presentation, and there's lots of things that you can do to cultivate an agile and a flexible mindset. One of the things, everything from taking a look at an agile thinker observes what's happening in their organization or in their project or in their industry, and they take note of it. And then they say, what is changing here? What things do I need to be mindful of? And then they make a plan of how to respond to that change. And then they take action. The one thing, if you remember anything from today, when change is happening, don't do nothing. Fostering leadership agility. There's assessment tools, there's training programs. There's been many people on this summit that have talked about different exercises that we can do to develop this kind of thinking, but it's really developing things like flexibility, responding to change. Most important, anticipating those change. Don't be blindsided by the things that will take you down. Nobody wants to hire a CEO that cannot make a decision. So decisions are, no one wants to hire a project leader that can't make a decision. So, and by all means, to lead. Sustain career evolution. A lot of people feel stuck these days. I talked to a lot of project managers, they feel stuck and they don't know exactly what to do. It's incumbent upon the organization as well as the individual to sustain this career evolution. What I mean by that is if you're in, say, a marketing role, that if you see something in a data research or research scientist area that interests you within the organization, it's important for you to be able to access that type of opportunity and to train for that type of opportunity. Reid Hoffman, who founded LinkedIn, called this kind of 2 to 3 year tours of duty within organizations. It didn't mean that people were job hopping. It just meant that they were learning everything they could about their role and moving on to the next role that would benefit LinkedIn as an organization. He wanted the continuing process of innovation within the organization, which I think he did a pretty good job achieving. The next one is nurture a culture of learning. It's a collaborative. There's self-directed learning. You'll hear a lot these days. We can't just put learning, everything that we were doing before, and just plop it on in a bunch of videos online. We have to create experiences now. We have to have polls. We have to have interaction. We have to have things. Kimi is putting on an event here that has a lot of different ways of presenting material here. This is an example of the type of event that would not have existed a year ago. It's a multidisciplined approach to it. And self-directed learning is a really big thing within organizations right now. I talk to a lot of learning executives. Support workplace experimentation. We talk about letting people fail. I know when I first had people working with me in my marketing department, I used to close my eyes sometimes because I was so afraid of what might happen. But what I had to let the people on my staff experiment. When I sent my first marketing director off to Europe to handle an entire program, an event by herself, yes, I was concerned, but I knew that everything that she was going to learn, she was going to make it better for the rest of her staff because she was going to make some mistakes and she was going to come back much more engaged and interested in her work. Mentorship and coaching. We might not all be able to have the expenses for a coach, but 60% of workers with an agile mindset seek mentoring and career guidance. And this could be with reverse mentoring, peer mentoring, and masterminds, etc. I'm going to summarize those. 6 things you can do to cultivate workforce agility. Cultivate an agile mindset, foster leadership agility, sustain career evolution. Most important, prevent stagnation. In the face of change, don't do nothing. Nurture a culture of learning. Support workplace experimentation. Experiment, measure, learn, and then improve and make it better and do it again. And then promote mentorship and coaching across the organization. This is not just for people in the C-suite. This is for people across the board. And I applaud the millennial generation for where we're at right now with mentoring and coaching. This is something that they have been asking for. They were the ones that asked for work from home before COVID. So they've done a lot to make our work environment evolve in a way, and the pandemic has taken care of the rest. And I do have a couple things that you can access off of my website. It is a 30-page white paper, Cultivate Career Agility Within Your Organization. happy, profitable employees happen from the perspective of the individual, but it also has to be from the perspective of the organization. And there's also a career agility guide. And on that note, if there are any questions that I could entertain, I am happy to do so right now, or give Kimi a chance to ask a question.
I would like to know if anybody took my suggestion, and boy, I sure wish that you had taken a screenshot of that. But we also wanted to make sure, and we made this promise to not just the speakers, but to you, that we would make sure that you got their contact information. So if you, of course, I'm doing this, it's probably on a different place on your screen. But if you look to the side of the main screen here, you will notice that Marti's LinkedIn information is there. And if I were you, signing up for her newsletter is a darn good idea. Well, I did get a question from someone who said, this has all been great. And my bladder and my tummy and I are all kind of wondering if you were planning on doing a bit of a health break soon. Yes, we are. But before we go, Marti, thank you so much. That was wonderful. And as I said, I hope you guys took a screenshot of that because Marti exceeded, as she often does, expectations. And she didn't just give you one or two things. Oh, no, she had a list of 6 things that you could do immediately. Thanks again, Marti.
Thanks a lot, Kimi.